Hello and welcome to the latest in our series of creative encounters from Journeys in Design. My name's John Ennis, curator producer at Journeys in Design, and I'm delighted today to be in conversation all the way from Cardiff. I'm in Edinburgh with illustrator and designer Sue Shields. Sue, hello.
Hello, John.
How are we doing? So just a little bit of context. Journeys in Design has a number of programs on the go, looking at the heritage, material innovation and contemporary design related to a material. So next year we're launching Concrete Designs to Thrive. We'll continue our look at seaweed with Salvage Scotland in the summer months. And we'll continue our rolling exploration of flax fibre and linen with our linen stories. And it's within the context of our linen stories that I've been delighted to meet and to collaborate with Sue. Now, Sue, before we say too much more, I just thought a wee reflection on what has been an extraordinary year for a lot of people. I mean, for everyone, of course, particularly, I think, for folk in the creative industry sector, makers, practitioners, and all the rest of it. Everyone's had to be adapting and evolving in different ways. And one of the joys of being able to speak with you today is that our project, which we'll speak of in a minute, called Making Millie, has captured the imagination at a time that's allowed it to give focus and creative energy at a tricky time for a number of people. And that's certainly been the feedback of the project. How has 2020 been for you, yourselves?
Well, it's been a weird time, as it has been for everybody, but I'm very lucky because I've got a lovely working space which I'm sitting in at the moment.
It was great.
Yeah, and it's been really interesting that the group that I'm part of, which are called MAP, which stands for Makers and Practitioners, we're a textile group, and we have members here in South Wales where it started, but we also have a member in Northern Ireland in the shape of Jane McCann, who we both know and in whose house we met. And we have another member called Sirpa Morski in Finland, who is somebody that Jane has worked with all over the world, in fact, and they have taught in China. They've collaborated in, over many projects, but particularly on this linen one. Normally we would rarely see them in our local MAP meetings, where we, go from house to house, actually. But we started a Zoom meeting on a Thursday morning on a weekly basis, and it's been really great being much closer to them, getting to know, integrating our lives really, and it's been great fun. And it's been fascinating also being in touch with Sirpa in Finland.
I mean, you've turned a tricky situation into the opportunities that it's released, and for us too. Being able to contact internationally practitioners and curators elsewhere has been a joy for us as well. We've been in Ghana, in the United States, across in Ireland, and these have been wonderful opportunities that perhaps we wouldn't have been channeled in that way. Thanks so much for mentioning both Sirpa and Jane. Sirpa is an extraordinary practitioner, and in terms of linen, she's grown her own flax, spun the flax into linen thread, woven with the thread. Really a remarkable practitioner. Very much hope to be in contact with her about around our Flax Fields project. And Jane, of course, a great mentor of mine and a great friend and colleague of yours as well. And yes, she brought us together around that dinner table in Donaghadee. It was wonderful. And in fact, that was a relationship born of MAP and of Jane's Linen Futures exhibition.
Yeah,
that's when I first saw your work as well. I think it was originally in our space in Lisburn, a wonderful little gallery complex and doing wonderful things culturally in the community in Lisburn. And then it went on to the Peninsula Gallery, which is where I saw your work most closely. with a period in between, a spell in between at the Ulster Museum. So it was great, and Serpa had her work there too. Do you want to tell us a little bit about Linen Futures?
Yes, I think it did originate in our space, and well, it was an opportunity to sort of go off in another direction for all of us, because the way Jane organised it, we had the gift of some wonderful linen that we were, you know, encouraged to make use of, to see where we would go with it. And in fact, I had a lot of lovely pieces of linen, but one particular run of it I thought was gorgeous, and it was brown linen on which I made into cushions, and the one side of the cushion were illustrations of particular people. Dorothy Parker was one of them, now I must just get this card.
Okay, yeah.
I won't worry about that.
Okay.
It was a wonderful Dorothy.
I would have been extraordinarily impressed. It's the side of a busy hands and head that there's that much activity in your studio. I would have been very impressed if you would.
Well, I'd done a postcard of it, and it was a wonderful Dorothy Parker quote about linen, and it was about it was about lingerie, and the word lingerie has got a linen origin in it, and that's why it was a good quote. And I'm sorry I haven't got the actual one, but never mind.
Let her mind wander. Let her mind wander on that one too.
Yes,
very interesting. And you know, Linen Futures is also where I saw the other work that, of course, enticed me into the collaboration, which we'll come on to in a moment, our Making Millie project and Tea Towel. But you mentioned a really interesting grouping there, that you've been able to reach out to the outliers in Finland and in Northern Ireland, but you're mainly South Wales based, and that's the MAP group. That's makers and practitioners, right?
Yeah.
And so that, as I understand it, was born of the fact that you all had teaching and making in
Yeah.
Do you want to let us know about the MAP group?
Yes, well, we started out as a group of teachers, really, because I was lucky enough to have a career where I was working in the college as an associate lecturer for half the week, and freelancing for half the week. So to me, that was the perfect mix. But the teaching had a lot to do with textile. And, you know, when you're working with students, you're, you know, delving into what possibilities their thinking is offering and making connections with, you know, different people that would inspire them and so on. And one of the things we then started to realize as a group of people teaching was that actually we could do with a lot more practice ourselves, practicing what we preach, and doing a lot more making, rather than, you know, investing all our energy into our students and what they were making.
Sure.
So
yeah.
well, that's when we formed Makers and Practitioners as an exhibiting group.
Right. So it was a group that obviously you could share your practice, but it gave you deadlines and exhibition dates and things to look forward to. So
yes,
that would be wonderful. I get a chance to speak to a number of different creative minds in the work that I do, and I often come across that balance between folk who do the teaching and you know, do that making, and that seems a very satisfying balance for a number of people, and perhaps also some flexibility built in there to parts of life. Wonderful.
No, I think it does. It works very well, and it feeds back into the teaching again too. You know, yeah.
Now you've been you've presented me with the summary of your career as an illustrator designer, and it's really communications design. and having had a chance to look through your portfolio online and have a chance to chat with you before, I know that you've not held back in the different opportunities that you've taken to apply that illustrative skills to different projects. Would you like to give us a little talk about one or two of the projects that you've been involved in, your favourites maybe?
Well, I suppose, you know, because we've been connected over the doll thing, if I go right back to the beginning of my career, when I had young children, I was making stuffed dolls. And because I was making them, for their amusement, and often they were screen printed and then, you know, stuffed as and wait, because I could do that at home. But I did enlarge that and just went up to London, and for goodness sake, I sold these, what they were, two dolls, an admiral and his wife, and I sold them in Liberty's Heels and Fortnum and Mason's. But my goodness me, those were, you know, that was in the late 70s, early 80s, and, you know, everywhere like that was much more accessible in those days.
Really?
Yeah, much more.
Well,
yeah,
of course, you had to make yourself, you know, had to put yourself in that position. So easy one wouldn't have done. So it is about putting yourself forward, which you obviously were able to do. And they loved your designs. And
no, I mean, it was a lovely sort of start. And it was then, you know, when the kids were small and I was at home all the time. But then I had a fabulous opportunity in Wales where the Welsh Arts Council were promoting their poetry through poster poems. And that was Mike Stevens, who was an amazing, you know, head of the literature department. And so I had this opportunity to do, you know, A1 images that, you know, reflected the poem and gave within the space somewhere for the poem to be reproduced really large for, you know, reading from a distance.
Beautiful.
And it was lovely actually, because very often students later on, when, you know, you'd have to explain who you were when you introduced yourself to your students, and they often said, "Oh, I grew up with that on my wall." You know, it was really nice. So
thing,
yeah. And then another sort of, you know, odd direction was the fact that I did a lot of book jackets, and then I ended up doing quite a lot of work for Marks and Spencer's.
We're ticking off the big names, the big retail names.
Yeah, I am, aren't I?
Heels to M&S.
That I did this book for them, which was a make-a-model book, which, you know, you had 2 card pages in the center, which you pulled out and cut out. And actually, you know, I love historical research, actually. This was another one I did, in which was their first store, which, you know, so they were great fun. You know, did a lot of work for magazines, and ended up actually as my long-term client, the in-house magazine for the Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. So I know the different versions of Shakespeare very well, because I was illustrating an article that one particular writer would write, you know, did Shakespeare mean this or did he mean that? And I got a sort of, you know, a good rapport with him.
Fantastic. I mean, I think that's a lovely segue for us to come in, because you clearly have a real interest in heritage and in history. And that's, I think, kind of where we really were able to release a little bit of creative energy between us, because when I saw that wonderful doll that you'd created for Linen Futures, I think I then also saw a doll you went on to create. So the first one was an Irish dancer, and then there was a Welsh doll. I don't know if do you have those handy?
Here, here she is.
So,
with her cape, because as she
she's
jogs
the
up,
Irish dancer. Wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So plenty of legs to
yeah.
and then.
And she then got me onto thinking, well, I ought to do one for my own homeland. So this is Mifanwi with her Swansea teapot, and it was this, I think.
It was exactly
the
that
two
one.
of them.
I mean, I think,
let's go.
you know, I saw that and I thought, well, this is really a no-brainer, because at that point I'd been looking at the heritage and contemporary practice of women in the linen industry, and I'd been struck as a man from Lisburn originally, which is a linen town, with how we used the term Millie in a very pejorative way to describe the women who worked in the mills at that point. And I think generically the mill or Millie comes from those who were working in the flax mills as opposed to the factories where they were weaving. But in terms of using the word Millie generically, dirty work, long work. So these women were dirty working class, and it then became a term to describe someone who was grubby, basically. And you know, in doing this project, our linen story is quite clear from early on. These were hardworking, multi-skilled, multitasking women who were the backbone of the first industry to arise in Scotland and in Ireland. And you know, textile workers being, in one sense, all part of our existence, because that's where we emerged in the Industrial Revolution, for better or worse. But I was so struck then with the opportunity to pay tribute with this utility object, this tea towel, to these working women. And you know, we had the chat, and you just absolutely took it on. So the first prototype drawings we displayed in Lisburn Cathedral in 2018. But at the time we revisited with our linen stories to the Irish Linen Centre, we were able to gift them the first Linen Millie tea towel. I'm going to hold this up. If anyone had said to me in my mid-50s I'd be interested in stuffed dolls, I'd have wondered what they were talking about. It's just served such a wonderful purpose in terms of tribute to an important part of our linen stories in Scotland. But it wasn't in Scotland that we went for our research base. We went to a much more accessible resource, and I think we should thank those who helped at the start of the project as well. You worked hard to do your research with the Irish Linen Centre and Lisburn Museum.
Yes, they were really, really helpful. You know, they showed me a whole load of evidence that they got for exactly what you're saying about the nature of the work of these girls. I was puzzled when you first asked me about it, because, you know, I thought, well, Millie, okay, but you know, the fact that, you know, they were barefoot very often. I mean, they wore shoes once on a Sunday. They would wear shoes on a Sunday. The rest of the time they were barefoot. They were working in very, very loud, noisy, quite frightening conditions. And the fact that the flax had to go through this hot water bath to keep flexible meant that it was, you know, it was the kind of situation where huge health and safety issues, as you said. Yep. And yet the spirit that comes through when you read the book that, you know, they recommended for me.
I think it wasn't it the lovely Fiona McKelvey who passed a copy on to you?
Exactly. Yes. Picking up the linen threads.
That's written by an American woman who has a particular interest in linen.
Yes. And I mean, what comes across is the amazing camaraderie of these women, and their affection for, you know, they became teams with bosses. And they, you know, the bosses and the teams had this amazing coordination, because when those machines stopped, they had to stop for such a short time, and everything had to be changed, and all the spools be taken off and new ones put on and rejoined. And amazing.
Absolutely amazing.
I now have massive respect for the Millies, thanks to you.
Absolutely. Both of us. And I think that what's been interesting for me is having a look at I mean, that culture is well known in Ireland, in Northern Ireland in particular. but in Scotland, less well known, but it's absolutely part of the DNA of the country in many ways. And my focus has been in the east coast of Scotland, and particularly in Fife, in a town called Kirkcaldy, which I sort of compare my mind's eye to where I grew up in Lisburn sometimes. A great town, great folk. But they've come forward and talked about the experiences. There's still Peter Gregg's linen factory there, but they had 11 factories at one point at their height, the turn of the century 19th into 20th. And I've been able to speak to a number of people. And absolutely, I spoke to an 87-year-old woman last year. She sat down with me, and she worked 5 years in the industry before she had her family, but she could still sit down and tie a knot faster than I could watch her tie it, but with that skill. And, you know, you couldn't pull that linen thread apart with her knot. So yes, very skilled, hardworking at a time when there wasn't the health and safety around that there was. So lots of wonderful stories collected in Scotland, and then reaching out to Ireland, Belgium, Holland, and France, which has been the basis of our linen stories. And of course, it's a shared culture. It's a shared occupational story and shared challenges. And that really has been the joy of working with your beautiful illustration and tea towel, and asking folk to make up the doll rather than just dry their dishes. And we've had some just amazing, well, we brought 18 dolls together for our exhibition at the Dovecote in Edinburgh at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. Wonderful stories linked to them. And this year we've ended up with more than 60 as women across Scotland, in Northern Ireland, down in England, and further afield have chosen to make up a doll from the tea towel and share the energy of both the chance to be creative themselves and a chance often to recognize the textile history in their own family. It's been wonderful. I've got several examples here, but I just want to show you a couple. This is Donna, and Donna has been made up from the tea towel. She has a shawl, and this is Morag from the Isle of Egg. Look at this. I mean, this is all individually embroidered. Her hair's embroidered. She has little buttons here. And Morag has a story. And this lady who made this up, her great-great-grandmother worked in the linen industry. So through this year, these dolls have been a focus for creative energy released in a very personal way about stories. We've also had amazing contributions from real skilled crafters. One jeweler in Edinburgh has made up and was beautiful. You include these wonderful tool belts, and this jeweler has created individual chain-linked tools in silver and wood in one of the dolls that we've received. So we're excited about that project, and in bringing them all together next year in Belfast and in Kirkcaldy to celebrate these skills and to go further with our story. And it's released, for example, stories of textile workers today across in India. So it has global reach as a story, and I'm excited about that rolling forward. So yes, that's a little bit of a tribute to you for your really engaging illustration, and to the women who've chosen to make up these dolls for us, and a little bit about the future projects for Journeys in Design. On that note, any future projects of your own you'd care to share, Sue?
Well, I'm I'm doing a lot of lino cutting, which has worked very well in lockdown.
Okay, is that something you've done forever and a day, or is that?
No, it's something that I've actually done for about the last 5 years. It's something I've gone back to, really. And I just, I love the sort of, well, it is the craft aspect of it, because in a way, the way you cut the lino is how the image becomes stronger, with the cutting marks showing and so on and so forth. So I've done one recent one, which is this was the original lino cut.
Oh, fantastic! Super strong. Yeah.
Yes, and you can see that the house is the St Faggan's folk museum, and it's the image is of the two people who were a lovely couple called Sir Edward and Lady Anne Lewis of Van, and the peony is the symbol of their happy marriage.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
A bit of, about them, which I think is a kind of interesting way to deal with things like, putting images on the sort of things that you buy in the gift shop, but also giving a sort of real insight into the place.
Absolutely, there's an intimacy to those objects which let a story unfold, and I mean, I think that's what certainly we're trying to do with Journeys in Design: give object focus, but stories and context.
Yes, yes.
Those are beautiful products, Sue. That's very exciting. They look lovely. Well, look, just a big thank you for sharing your time, your creative energy, both in the Linen Millie project and today for our conversation.
Oh, it's been really good. It's been very enjoyable.
Excellent, and we'll look forward to meeting up when we're allowed to.
Yeah, won't that be good?
I'd love to see you up in Scotland.
Lovely. Look forward to it.
All the very best.
Okay. Bye,
Cheers.
John.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.